In this module, we had the chance to create our first lesson plans and turn them into a unit plan. To begin, we picked a standard to use that we would end up using for the rest of the module. Over the course of this module, I had the chance to go to the school where I'll be teaching in the fall to observe some different teachers. I spent most of my time with Miss Brothers, the current 6th grade teacher, but I also visited a whole range of classrooms. One of the most effective lessons that I observed was a 6th grade math lesson that Miss Brothers did on probability. Interestingly enough, I had a chance to talk with her earlier in the week, and she told me that she really does not enjoy teaching probability to her students. She said that she'd been working for a while to come up with a fun, engaging way to teach probability, but she just kept hitting dead ends. She bounced some ideas off of me, one of which was to have students flip coins and roll dice to practice with probability, which I thought was a great idea. We gathered all of the materials she would need, and she planned out her lesson. This was the first real-world lesson I had ever actually gotten to watch be planned, and I really enjoyed the experience. I thought it was neat that Miss Brothers, despite having been a teacher for over 5 years, was still looking for new ways to reach her students. In addition to using hands-on learning to engage students, Miss Brothers also incorporated some great checks for understanding during the introduction to probability. She had students do think, pair, shares to really get them thinking. I really like this method because, unlike more traditional partner discussions, students have to think before they start discussing. This is useful to make sure that students do their own thinking, rather than just relying on a partner for all of the answers. Another lesson that I observed that really stood out to me was one in Miss Thompson's 2nd grade classroom. Although I did not have a chance to discuss a lot of lesson planning strategies with her, it was clear that it had taken her years to perfect this particular lesson. Instead of creating a single unit on money, Miss Thompson incorporated this learning into the class's morning routine. Because I was observing at the end of the school year, I got to see a mostly finished product of her teaching. Students knew songs about each of the coins, and they could answer questions about them that I was unsure of the answers to. Miss Thompson turned her class's morning routine into a game, where all of the students started out standing. Then she would go around the room asking questions. If a student couldn't answer or got the question wrong, they had to sit down. The game continued until either there was only one person left standing or Miss Thompson ran out of questions. I loved the culture that she set up in her classroom. Being wrong was thoroughly accepted, and students really bought into the game model. Although this strategy might be a bit young for my students, I liked the idea of a unit being stretched across the start of class, even if it's not for the full year like this one was. One way I thought I could use this strategy in my English class would be to start class with a brief discussion or reading of a poem or talking about a poet. This would expose students to different kinds of poetry, and it would help really link my class together. Despite being in middle school, my students will need routines, or procedures and norms, just as much as the 2nd graders that I observed. This would be a great age-appropriate strategy for me to try. When we first started this unit, I was really nervous about lesson planning. I had never really done it before, and I knew how important it was to being an effective teacher, so I was afraid I would be really bad at it. Luckily, we got to learn some strategies to help us plan. My personal favorite is backwards mapping. You start out with where you want to go. In this case, you start out with a standard. Then, you start thinking through the proficiencies students would have to have in order to really have completed the unit. Once you have determined proficiencies, you have to figure out how you're going to measure those proficiencies or what assessments you're going to use. Once you've determined your assessments, you figure out the means by which the students will acquire the necessary information, which comes in the form of activities. Backwards mapping is really helpful because it helps keep you on track while you're planning. There are so many cool things that students can learn and so many cool ways that they can learn them. that it's really easy to get sidetracked when lesson planning. Backwards mapping makes it so much easier to get where you're going because you already know where you're trying to get before you even start. Overall, I really enjoyed this module. I do wish it had come at a slightly different time for me. I actually got married in the middle of the module, so that made me fall behind a bit, and I still kind of feel like I'm rushing to catch up. I guess being this busy during a module on such a practical scale was good for me. Now I know that I can lesson plan under pressure and with less time than I would like, which is a great skill for a first-year teacher to have.